Another week, another set of polls showing Liz Truss way ahead of Rishi Sunak. Though this week saw her first blunder over the pay of public sector workers across the country, will anything turn the Liz Truss tide? I'm joined by Deputy Political Editor Katie Balls and the historian Robert Toombs. Katie and Robert, welcome to Spectator TV. Now, Katie, can you update viewers on what's happened in the Tory leadership campaign over the last week? Because it does look like Liz Truss is the one with the momentum, with a number of cabinet endorsements over the last 7 days.
Yes, it was still technically in the early stages of the Tory leadership campaign. The victor, the new Prime Minister, is not announced to early September. But this week the ballots are going out, slightly delayed due to security concerns. And there is an expectation amongst some MPs, but not all, that members will vote fairly quickly. When you're looking at the polling, Liz Truss seems pretty far out in front. The YouGov poll, Conservative Home poll, all pointing to a really big lead. But Rishi Sunak's supporters and his campaign team are saying that when they look at the polls, it doesn't actually correlate to what they're hearing on the ground. They think it's much closer than this. Now, of course, they would say that because it's in their interest to make it seem as though this race is not a done deal. But I think it is just worth bearing in mind how tricky it is to poll the membership. And that's why we have to, with all these different factors at play, I think that by far the bookies' favourite right now is Liz Truss. It feels as though the most likely situation by some margin is that she is the next Prime Minister, but it is not over till it's over.
Robert, how do you feel about Liz Truss's head start here? Because you had written for The Spectator before that you were endorsing Kemi Badenoch, but obviously she's no longer in the race.
Yes, quite so. Yes, I do hope that Liz Truss will be chosen. I'm not a party member, so I have no say in the matter, but I think partly because of what she said, partly because of what she's done, and not a little because of who supports her and who doesn't. And the people I tend to trust support her, and the people whom I'm not quite so willing to trust tend to be against her. That's the best I can do, I'm afraid. As an outside observer, that's what makes me form my view.
Are you not a little bit cynical about the cabinet endorsements that have gone to her in the last few days, and the non-cabinet ones? People like former rivals Tom Tugendhat, Penny Mordaunt, Sajid Javid. You know, when you say people who support her, it does seem like a lot of ambitious politicians who support her.
Yes, I'm quite cynical, as everyone else is. But of course, not everyone is supporting her because they think they'll get a job. Some of the people I'm thinking of are people who are not likely to get cabinet posts, won't mention any names, and also, of course, people outside the House of Commons who support her too. And I mean, the things that count for me are to some extent the Northern Ireland Protocol. You know, I think this has become partly a symbol and also something of real importance. And it seems clear that Rishi Sunak is drawing back from trying to resolve this question, and Liz Truss seems to be willing to take the bull by the horns. And I think that the protocol has become really a sort of acid test for attitudes to Brexit, not whether you're for it or against it, but what you think it really means in practice, and whether you think you should push ahead or try to limit the effects. And I think Liz Truss clearly thinks that you have to go for being more than just another Norway.
And Katie, speaking of pushing ahead with Liz Truss, I mean, that does seem like it embodies her entire campaign, her entire personality. You write in The Spectator this week about her foreign policy, which is very much pushing ahead. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, a part of that is the Northern Ireland Protocol, as we just heard, and the fact she does take a more bullish approach. I think Rishi Sunak is far more concerned about the risk of sparking a trade war with the EU during a cost of living crisis, whereas Liz Truss, as she said in the hustings this week, feels that the only thing the EU really recognise is strength and force, and therefore you have to be bold in your approach. I also think it's worth noting when Liz Truss gave her first party conference speech as Foreign Secretary, she didn't mention the EU once, which I think gives you a sense, I would say, of her priorities when we're talking about her foreign policy, because what she has pioneered during her time in the Foreign Office having been appointed last September, is effectively this idea of a network of liberty. That's what she refers to it as, her supporters do. And I think when it comes to how she views the world, it's pretty black and white in the sense of, do you support liberty and freedom or are you against it? And I think that dictates how she wants to work with countries, whether that is on security, alliances, or even trade.
Well, I was very encouraged by Katie's article because I think the world has changed very much since 2016. Then we were thinking that our foreign policy was dominated by our relations with the EU. But I think what's happened in the last year or more, less than a year, is that we've come to realize that the EU is not really a source of strength, is not a source of security, and is not really a viable partner. And an ambitious global policy, which at first looked like just words, seems to me now, and I thought this is what I drew from Katie's article, is really something that we have to do. Our security and our trading interests push us in that direction. And I think that Liz Truss, if she can do it, at least has that vision.
Robert, very finally and briefly, is there anything that Rishi Sunak can do to persuade you to go to support him, at least in principle, even if you don't have a vote? Or do you think his greatest opportunity are with the undecided Tory voters?
Well, I think he's the candidate of the undecided, and in a way, he's the candidate of the non-Tories, and not. I don't mean this as a criticism of him. I think from all I know of him, he's a man of intelligence, honesty, charm, all the rest, and I think has a lot to offer. But I think he is the orthodox candidate, and he, above all, has become the candidate of Treasury orthodoxy. And I think that this is not what we want at the moment. And I think some of the language he uses is rather talking down to the electorate, talking about the nation's credit card and that sort of thing. That's not how the economy works. And I think that his insistence on an orthodox retrenchment policy as we're heading into a probable recession is simply the wrong and the most dangerous thing that one could do. But I think it's typical of the Treasury's attitude over the years.
Robert Toombs and Katie Balls, thank you so much for joining Spectator TV.